Which Roman emperor is Donald Trump most like?
You know,
Mary, how are you?
great to be here.
I've got a campaign on this podcast to ban the word Shakespearean from all broadcasting and from all thought, actually. I think Shakespeare is the most intellectually indolent OTO's nonsense because it's so imprecise. I would like to invite you to express a similar view when it comes to comparisons with the Roman Empire. People say, how often do people say to you, Mary, which emperor, which Roman emperor is Donald Trump most like?
You know, I hate it. I just hate it.
Good.
And in Donald Trump's, and I'm being quite careful here, in his first presidency, and we wait to see what happens next, the commonest question I got was exactly that, Amol. It was, what Roman emperor is Donald Trump most like? And if somebody was on the phone and I got a bit of time, I would say, have you got 15 minutes? Because we'll go through this and we'll have a bit of a discussion about why that's not a very sensible question, right? That, you know, I might hate Donald Trump all kinds of ways, but he wasn't like a Roman emperor, and he wasn't, he wasn't as bad. You know, he's not Nero, guys. If I didn't have the time, what I would do is I would just name an emperor I knew they hadn't heard of.
That way they go away.
Elagabalus.
Oh,
Yes,
I know
Elagabalus.
Now, you might have heard, if
Quite a
you've
big fan
watched
of
horror,
Elagabalus,
if you've
actually.
horrible histories featured Elagabalus. So there is a kind of group of kids who know about Elagabalus, Syrian teenage emperor of the early 3rd century. But I thought,
I know, you don't need to tell us. I mean,
I know you know. No,
Honestly,
sorry,
really.
talking down. I
it
should
was when
know
Mr.
better.
Johnson
I'm
mentioned
thinking it's
Cincinnatus
more-
and the plough, and I thought, yeah, God, we know this stuff.
But I thought what was great, they'd say, that's Elagabal. Yeah, I'd say that's fine.
Yeah.
And then they'd kind of say, yeah, okay, fine. And I thought, well, at least you'll learn something, because I know what you're going to do now. You're going to go and Google Elagabalus.
Yeah.
And you'll find out
And that will
something
then never appear in the paper.
It'll never appear in no paper, but that particular reporter will know something that he or she didn't know before.
But you can teach us a bit about machinations from your study of the Roman Empire. What occurs to you as you look at the modern world now that we are learning?
I mean, I think the ancient what the ancient world's good at is making you rethink yourself. It isn't good at solving problems. We are actually better at solving problems than the Romans are. You know, we don't want to. You know, we're not going to follow them, but it can sometimes jolt you out of the assumption that what we're doing is new. And maybe, there's a terrible presentist fallacy in, I think, international politics, that we're the first people to have dealt with this problem. Well, you go back to, I think, before the Roman Empire, to when Rome was still a kind of sort of democracy. A bit of an odd sort of democracy, but it was sort of democratic. And there's a wonderful little pamphlet that still survives, supposedly by the brother of Marcus Tullius Cicero, one of the most famous politicians of the 1st century BC. It might be a fake, but it doesn't really matter. And it's advice on how to get elected. And, sometimes you think that Boris Johnson might have read this. I'm sure he had. But this little pamphlet says, right, what do you do to get elected? Well, you have to go and glad hand people. You have to make sure you know their names. And you have to remember that you can promise anything, because nobody is going to hold you to account later. So, lying, promising, that is fine. You just want to make everybody love you. And it's not only Johnson that's taken that message, even if not directly.
But so if there's a limit to what we can infer from our study of ancient Rome, or how useful it is for, I don't know, fixing the small boats policy or tapered tax relief on pensions or whatever it might be, why is it so often invoked? Is it partly because the invocation of Rome, often done in an intellectually lazy way, acts as a kind of social gatekeeper? It sort of creates an in-crowd, people who have a classical education who don't?
I hope it doesn't. I mean, people say, look, to invoke Rome is always to exclude somebody. It's to exclude the people who think they don't know about Rome. And up to a point, I think, that's that's not entirely wrong. But actually, I think Rome is much more incorporating than that. When we think about what does it mean to know about ancient Rome, we think it means learning Latin and, studying at an expensive school. Everybody knows about Rome. Everybody has watched Gladiator, Spartacus, Ben-Hur. They're now watching Those About to Die. And Rome has provided us with a larger-than-life vision of what it is to be ourselves, and a larger-than-life vision of autocracy, of corruption, politics, sex, you name it. The Romans, they set out to be larger than life, and they succeeded.
Are you saying, though, that it actually cheers you up about the modern world to remind yourself that things were worse?
In some ways, it cheers me up. I think that, there's a terrible kind of gloom in some bits of modern politics, which is that we're just going downhill. Well, you tried 2,000 years ago, guys. It was a lot worse then. But I think that it's kind of more than that. I think it's that there is, in some ways, you can see in the ancient world some attempts to deal with the kind of problems that we have. But you can also see where we've invented problems where they didn't have them. And it just makes you look again at what you think you are grappling with for the first time.
Give us some examples, Mary, of issues that they grappled with that have some sort of relevance to now.
What it is to be a citizen, what the rights of the citizen are. I mean, there's a very famous phrase that was used by President Kennedy when he was speaking in Berlin, in the middle of the Cold War, and he referred to Rome and
Civis Romanus sum.
Civis Romanus sum.
Civis, there we go.
Civis, sorry, Amol, but Ich bin ein Berliner, right? Now, what is it? What do citizen rights give you? What do they allow you to do or not to do? And what sort of slogan is that? And I've always reckoned that Kennedy, or his speechwriters, I suppose, didn't quite know when that phrase was first used, because it was actually first used, and it's reported by Cicero, by a Roman citizen who is being crucified, because crucifixion was a common Roman punishment. Citizens were supposed to be immune from crucifixion. This citizen was being crucified by a rogue governor of the province of Sicily.
So he cries out, "I am a Roman citizen."
He cries out, "Civis Romanus sum, civis Romanus sum." But in fact, it does him no good at all. And it looks like a great slogan. I'm a Roman citizen. But it's first used in the way that we know it by someone who is actually being totally illegally put to death. And they'd put up the cross so that he was facing Rome. Just to kind of... And I think you say, right, OK, these slogans have always been powerful rallying cries, but also utterly undermined.
I feel like Nick and I should have a competition about who can ask the most stupid question about parallels with the ancient world. I feel like who could really. So we've banned no more comparisons of Joe Biden and King Lear, because that doesn't really work. What's the stupidest question? So we're not going to do which Roman emperor was Trump most like. What about what could Kamala Harris learn from Cleopatra?
He asked it.
Okay, what
wasn't me?
Mary Bid, what could Kamala Harris learn from Cleopatra?
Don't hitch up with a guy like Anthony, I think, is,